Hello and welcome to another tier list. Today we are taking a look at the Star Wars movies. I have the 3 trilogies along with the 2 standalone movies, Rogue One and Solo, and so we're going to be going through them in order of release, so let's jump in. The first movie, of course, is the original Star Wars movie, later renamed to Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. Now, for the first movie in the trilogy that has to do a lot of character building and background, I really think it does a pretty good job of still telling a fun and interesting story. The action is pretty good. Obviously, the special effects and graphics don't quite hold up because the movie is quite dated, but overall, it's got good story, good action. There's nothing really too much I can criticize about the movie, so I'll put it in a solid B tier. Up next, we have The Empire Strikes Back. Now, this is, I think, probably the strongest movie in the original trilogy. I think the Battle of Hoth is probably the best part in the original trilogy in general. And overall, there's just a lot of good action scenes, a lot of good story. It does a really good job of further developing the characters. I think that lands it in a solid S tier. I really don't have any complaints about that movie. It's got great action, great story. Overall, just really solid. Up next, we have Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Now, this is obviously the final movie in the original trilogy, and overall, I think it does a pretty good job of tying everything together from the previous 2 movies and giving us a satisfying conclusion. I will say it is a little bit slow in some parts, and particularly the Ewok battle on Endor is a little questionable at times, but overall, it's a solid movie. It doesn't conclude perfectly, I would say. It still leaves a little bit to be desired in the ending, but overall, I'd say it's pretty solid, and we'll put it in the B tier. Up next, we have Episode 1. Now, I liked this movie, but I would say it leaves a lot to be desired. It's pretty slow throughout most of the movie. The acting is pretty subpar, and the scripts are not the best. But the ending of the movie is really what makes it a solid contender as a Star Wars movie. The battle between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul, I mean, with Duel of Fates playing in the background, it really makes the whole movie. I mean, you honestly don't even need to see the rest of the movie. If you just see that final fight, you'll walk away being satisfied. But because of the subpar acting and the subpar scripting, and it just focuses a little too much on the political system of the Star Wars universe, it's a bit slow, so I'll put it in the C tier. It would be honestly much lower if it weren't for the incredible fight at the end of the movie. Up next, we have Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, a pretty good movie, but I would say it still suffers from some of the same things that plagued Episode 1, which is subpar level acting and scripts that are just really horrible dialogue. I'm sure many of you guys can think of several examples in the movie where the dialogue is just pretty cringy. But overall, it does have some interesting parts. Not super action-packed, but it does have some interesting plot, particularly with Obi-Wan going to Kamino. I found that to be quite interesting, so I think overall it's a little bit stronger than Episode 1. It doesn't have any particular scene that blows me away like Episode 1 does with the Darth Maul fight, but overall I think it's pretty good. And just overall a bit stronger, so I'll put it in the B tier. Up next, we have Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, I think this is by far the strongest movie in this trilogy, and one thing I really like is the acting really seems to be much better. The dialogue is still not the best, but it's a huge improvement over Episode 1 and 2 I found. And what I like the most is that they do a really good job of painting the character arc of Anakin slowly descending to the dark side. You can really see him slowly change throughout the movie, and I think that they did that really well. It's got quite a bit of action compared to the 2 previous movies. Overall, I just think it's fantastic. I think it's really good. Easy S tier for me. Up next, we have the first episode of the new trilogy, so Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Now, this obviously being the first Star Wars movie that had come out in a long time, and I think they did a pretty good job. You know, expectations were always going to be super high for a new Star Wars movie coming out after all these years, and I don't think they blew me away. They didn't exceed my expectations, but I went in, I saw the movie, I liked the characters, I thought the characters were good, the effects were good, I thought the dialogue was pretty good. it's a fair criticism to say that it's a little bit of a copy of A New Hope with them kind of just ripping off the Death Star and building a bigger and better Death Star. But overall, that didn't really take me out of the movie too much. I still thought it was solid. Not the best, but I'd put it in the B tier. Up next, we have Rogue One. This is one of the standalone movies they put in between the new sequels, and this takes place between episodes 3 and 4. And I didn't really have a whole lot of expectations going into this movie, but I was really impressed. I really enjoyed it. The acting was good, the action was good. Just overall, really solid for a standalone Star Wars movie. I was really impressed with just how much they were able to pack into one movie. For me, easy A tier. Up next, we have Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Now, this movie, many others had issues with it, and I had a ton of issues with it. I mean, if you were to change all the characters and keep the world the same, you might not even know it's a Star Wars movie just because they introduce so many concepts and ideas that are so not Star Wars. I mean, things like fuel and limited jumps to hyperspace and smaller ships being able to go slightly faster than bigger ships and shields, only working at a certain range in space. Just so many things that didn't really make sense. The characters, I just felt like they were so wasted, and even plot-wise, I mean, if you look at where The Force Awakens ends and The Last Jedi ends, almost nothing happens between that movie. I mean, there's so little character development, with the exception of Rey and Luke. Just almost nothing beneficial happens. I mean, so many of the other characters that were really important in the first movie are just completely wasted here, and overall, I just have a ton of issues with it. Solid F tier, by far the worst Star Wars movie on this list. None of them even come close for me. Up next, we have Solo. Now, this was a movie I didn't actually see right away. I mean, all the new Star Wars movies I saw in theaters with the exception of Solo. I think after The Last Jedi came up, I was just really not looking forward to the next Star Wars movie because I was so disappointed. So I didn't actually watch this one until it came on Netflix about a year and a half, 2 years later. And I hadn't heard great things. I heard a lot of people were disappointed. When I watched it, I actually quite liked it. I thought it was pretty good. Some people complained that the actor playing Han Solo didn't look enough like Harrison Ford, but I personally don't have an issue with that. I mean, I think it's going to be hard to find someone who looks well and can also play the part. I felt like he played the part of Han Solo really well, and overall the story and the plot was pretty good. And I quite enjoyed it. It wasn't spectacular, but it was a good movie, so that'll land it along in the B tier. Up next, we have the final episode of the new Star Wars sequels, The Rise of Skywalker. Now, this movie, it was definitely once again recognizably a Star Wars movie, but I did have some issues with it. I mean, it just seemed to undo so many things, not only from the previous episode, which I didn't like, but even just from the original trilogy, like Darth Sidious coming back to life. I really did not like that. I found it really weird, and they didn't really explain it, and then we find out that Rey is actually bloodline of the Emperor, and that doesn't really make sense, and they didn't explain that any further. So overall, it was pretty unsatisfying in terms of all the things they seem to undo from Star Wars history. But it did have some good action. It was enjoyable, much better than the previous movie. I thought the ending was pretty good, but there was just a lot of stuff that didn't really make sense. So because of that, I'm going to be putting it in the D tier. Now, I'm sure many of you are going to have stark disagreements about where things belong on this list, and I would love to hear them, so let me know in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoy.